Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to our very first episode of AI in Real Life, where we actually show you how AI is changing the craft of building a product. And to help me do that, in our studio today, I have Jenny and Steedan. Both are excellent PMs and great AI PM consultants who have helped several organizations help with transforming the way they work. The way this podcast works is that Jenny, Steven, and I are going to go through a very simple scenario. We're going to talk about how PMs or product organizations can use AI to actually help figure out how to get and go faster, make better decisions, and ultimately deliver bigger impact. Jenny, Steven, welcome.
Thanks, Mustafa. Excited to be here.
Yeah. If it's okay with you guys, I'm going to jump straight into the scenario because that's probably what the audience is waiting for. So you guys have been through this. You've all been through it in some time or the other. Is that sometimes we launch something, we launch a product or a feature, we're really proud about it, we're really excited about it, and then it fails, and it fails when it has nothing to do with the product itself, right? And one of the reasons why it fails is because we just haven't prepared our internal partners, our sales, marketing, customer support, of what's going to happen. Right? So I decided to take a real scenario from one of our clients. The names have, of course, been changed to protect the innocent. Let's introduce you to Peter. Peter is a product manager who works in a mid-sized company. He's had this great idea about actually adding more transparency and visibility to the billing feature. It's something that he's heard from his clients or customers all the time. And so he decides to actually push this out. And like every other PM who does that, he works hard on the PRD. He makes sure that you have the right feature. He works with engineering. And then when the launch day comes, he writes a short note to let customer support know, lets sales and marketing know that this feature's coming out, creates a release note, sends an email, and then he's off to the other project or the other product. And you know how this always turns out, right? Customer support, sales, marketing are not prepared for it. A few days later, tickets start spiking. Customers are seeing new things on their bills that they've never seen before, and they think that they're getting overcharged, right? So customer support is getting all of these call volumes, so they don't know how to answer that. Marketing, on the other hand, takes a very different approach. Marketing says, oh, great, new feature. Our customers are asking about billing, so they're going to write a short article. They're going to do a big marketing blast, and they're going to say, oh, now you can have complete visibility into where your billing is. And then when the customer starts looking at it or their sales team gets a wind of it, the customers start asking them questions about the billing because they've seen things or charges or more detail that they've never seen before, right? And so we're going to use this scenario to talk about how AI can actually help Peter help prepare his team or prepare his partners better so that when the product is launched, it successfully launches not just on the product side, but also all on the partner side. Does that work for you guys?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Perfect. So before we actually jump into it, I'm just curious. I know when we talked about this before, you guys all shared about some of the horror stories that you guys have been through when this has happened. Tell me more, just from your experience, how it's been.
Jenny, you want to go first?
Sure, I could take this one. So I've been on both sides. I've actually been on the customer support side and customer success side as well as product. And so I definitely empathize with both. On the product side, there's lots of moving pieces. You're the quarterback to making sure that everything goes live, as you expected. Not only the fun part about figuring out what to build and why, but there's a lot of just that execution on launch that goes into it for success. And things get missed. I mean, we're human, right? It happens. Yeah. And typically you don't have time to sit down and have several meetings to kind of train and get all of those edge cases out ahead of launch. So things tend to be rushed at times, depending on the size of the release. And even if you do it all, quote unquote, the right way, there are still questions that come up that you weren't expecting, whether it be from customers or from the support team or, even in marketing and sales. And so you kind of got to be ready for, it's hard to predict the questions and not miss anything. And
Yeah.
then you also want to create this emotional comfort as well, that they know where
Mm.
to go. They have that confidence in their answers. They
Yeah.
don't feel fearful every time we go
Yeah.
live with something that we're going to break other things, right? There's that level of trust, I think,
Yeah.
too, that has to be built in well-functioning
100%. I mean,
teams.
they're on the front lines. They're probably taking all the incoming the volley,
Hmm.
right? And so they want to be prepared. No, I 100% agree. Steven, what about you?
Yeah, lots of similar challenges. One thing in particular I've noticed in large organizations where there are a lot of changes happening across multiple products or areas of the product, or just in smaller teams that just move really fast, there's a lot of information being put out there about what's happening, what's being released, what the changes are. No matter how good of a job you do, even if you do it perfectly and you let everybody know, give them lots of heads up, people forget. And people lose track of, well, what was in this release and versus what was released 2 months ago, and how does that change? And so
Yeah.
having these streams or feeds of updates and changes, maybe they're release notes or an internal Slack channel, they're great. They can give people a heads up, but sometimes everything that you're doing gets just lost in
Yeah.
the noise. And so then you end up tagging certain people from certain teams because oh, that accounting is really interested in this feature and marketing is really interested in that feature. And it just really becomes very difficult to manage without AI. But AI
Yeah.
can definitely make that a lot easier.
100%. And the other part of it is, and yes, it's time consuming. We as PMs just don't have enough time. We have other products to launch. And frankly speaking, it's not fun. I mean, who likes writing release notes? Or who likes writing knowledge-based articles that you have to go through all level of detail just so that you can get everybody else ready? And from an organization and CPO perspective, it's extremely important because you can have a great product, but if the launch is a failure, then in many ways the product is a failure too, right? Because that cost of customer support or losing the deal because there's, the customer feels that their billing has changed or their pricing has changed or the marketing having to re-explain itself. I mean, there's a real cost to it, right? And it hurts not just real dollars, but also the brand, right? So the stakes can be quite high, which is why, at least when I was running product, our go-to-market, we spend so much time on the go-to-market piece just so that we can make sure that, yes, we buttoned up everything on the back end from our end, but we want to make sure that we were actually preparing everyone and the customers for what's coming. Actually, listen, I can commiserate with you guys on this forever. Let's actually jump in. So for our audience out there, we prepared a brief of what would it look like. And Jenny and Steedan, they work together and they're going to actually walk us through how you can use AI to actually help you get a much more smoother launch, right? Jenny, I think you're going to take it first, yeah?
Sure, yeah.
Perfect. Do you want me to share your screen or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, you can share my screen. I'll walk you guys through all the steps that I took to what's kind of done currently, and then I'll talk a little bit about my approach,
Perfect.
and then
Yeah.
you can
Actually,
answer questions as
put
we go
yourself
through.
put yourself in Peter's shoes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And tell me how you would approach it if from the time that Peter is about to sign off and ready to tell marketing and customer service or customer support what's happening. Yeah. And let me go find your screen. There you go. Okay. So just high level, tell me what you did first, and then I would love for you to show me what you did.
Yeah. So the biggest thing, I always start with what I'm trying to achieve. So we talked about the problem, and then I kind of thought through, what do I want to make sure that our cross-functional team, in this case, I used customer success, customer support, our frontline team, what do they need to know to, like I said, have that trust, that confidence in being able to service our customers effectively. And so they need to know the why behind the decisions. They need to be able to explain it clearly, and they need to be able to know whether this is my favorite question, whether this is expected as designed or truly a bug that needs to be escalated. And so I want to make sure they have all of those things armed and equipped with the solution that I create with AI. So we've talked
Perfect.
about the knowledge base article not being enough. So instead of just using that one static document, I actually used AI to create 2 context references as the sources that'll be used for the support agent. That's going to be a live interactive tool for the customer support team to interact with in real time and get help and
Perfect.
get answers to the customer's questions while they're on the call with them or
Okay.
maybe while they're emailing them. So first step, and I actually did 2, I mentioned 2 reference documents, and that's intentional. I have both an internal facing one and an external facing one. And I initially didn't start with both. I tried to put it into one, but I just felt that there's this nuance of, like I said, the internal context that you want the customer support team to know about.
Yeah.
But then, and that's the why behind the decision, the new feature. But then you also want them to have that external clarity for the customer of like what they can say, like what you feel safe saying
Perfect.
to the customer about
Yes.
that new release. So that's why I had both. I just wanted to share that context a little bit.
Okay.
So,
Good.
first step, I took the internal, or I created an internal knowledge article. And you could see here, I did a well-structured prompt and I paired that with 3 context references here. You mentioned, a lot of the internal awareness of behind something that you built, why you built a certain feature is scattered everywhere. We talked about it.
Yeah.
Slack archives, internal communications, customer interviews, feedback transcripts and PRDs, wherever you manage your work in Jira or DevOps. And so there's a lot of these different sources. I pulled 3 of them together that were exhaustive documents. And then I paired that with the well-structured prompt to then create this external facing communication doc. And
Perfect.
I did tell it, I told it the structure, how does it work, known limitations, how to handle anticipated customer questions. So, what would the customer service team ask? And then, of course, escalation guidance. And then I even told it to flag things that maybe I had gaps. So, you know, if it was like, oh, you need to clarify, that 30-day inactivity, agents are going to need to have to explain this. So I actually even told it to flag where my personal gaps are and then I filled those in the final version
Yeah.
of this article.
So what I like about this one is that you actually are not just creating a knowledge base article. You first asked it, what are the potential questions that they're going to get from customers, right?
Mhm.
That is what you're using to then create the article.
Yeah.
Is that fair? Okay, good.
Yep.
And
How
I
to
like
handle
that because you know what,
anticipated
we see
ones.
that
Mhm.
with our, when we talk to clients, we see it all the time, right? The idea is that you can use AI to then predict what people are going to ask and then build an article based on that, as opposed to just
Mhm.
building something, right?
Yep. And so I can't just take it at face value. Obviously, I read through it, made sure that it
Yeah,
had the gaps filled. I felt comfortable, it was accurate. And then I'm going to now use that internal document, which is the exhaustive one, the source of truth, to now make that customer facing external doc. So that was my next step. And I broke these up into kind of like into stages, clear tasks for Claude to do each time. So I did another well-structured prompt, but this time it's for customer facing. And I want them to include only certain things and kind of keep that verbiage in a unique way in terms of how we want to share things with customers. And I used the internal knowledge base article that I just mentioned I created as reference and context for this.
right.
Same thing. It spit out a really nice release note or knowledge base article that we could publish on, whatever help site that we have. And then I fed both of those into my Claude project agent. So this is going to be the customer support agent. Both of those files you can see here are reference documents. And then I also created instructions that tells this agent how to behave, how to respond, um,
Perfect.
how to help the customer support agents when certain types of questions arise. So let's test it. Maybe we have, so it's a new billing feature. I'm going to think through a question really quick. Say customer is complaining about unexpected charges on their bill. Why might this be? So it looks like it's giving a most likely explanation that it's truly just based on visibility, not necessarily changes in what they're being charged. And then it gives a little bit, however, make sure this is true. If the customer is saying the total amount looks wrong, not just unfamiliar, that's an escalation trigger. So it's actually flagging, like, make sure when you're troubleshooting this, you check this piece too, because that's stuff that we would definitely want to know about. And it'll even give a suggestive reply. So that's part of those agent instructions
Right.
that I fed it. Maybe actually give them something to say instead of just telling them what might be wrong. And then, like I said, a couple of troubleshooting escalation checks to run through before they say, or go to engineering for that one.
It's perfect. I really like the idea. Actually, I like all three. So if I had to play back what you just did, is step one is you didn't just create a knowledge base article. You use AI to first predict what kind of questions you're going to get, what kind of questions customer support is going to get, right? And then based on that, you had AI write the first draft. And then instead of giving them that first draft as a static document, you actually went further and you actually built an agent. And so now you're not just giving them a 2D document. You're literally giving them an agent in which that agent they can chat with based on the context that you created. So it's a lot more, it can answer a lot more questions as opposed to just being static, right? So you really push
transactional.
That's great. I love the 3 steps. And it follows, by the way, the operating practices that we've been talking about with our clients too, right? So that's fantastic. This is good. Steedan, I know you and Jenny worked on this together, but you actually took a very different approach, didn't you?
Well, slightly different. I mean, very, very similar in terms of how I got there, in terms of getting the knowledge base article and getting that information. And if you want, I can share my screen as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the main difference is I assumed as I was going through this that the information about the product was the same, whether it was an internal or external stakeholder. I did use customer questions and try to anticipate customer questions to create a internal kind of knowledge doc about the features. So that's what I have here. It's about 10 pages. What I did, though, is instead of having 2 separate knowledge docs that I have to maintain, or context docs, I let the agent control that. So here I have my internal agent, and I would have one as well for external. And the agent itself has some instructions about how it's going to communicate with the person using it.
Yeah.
So in this case, we know it's an internal person, but the knowledge itself is the same. The reason I did that, I was thinking more about, how would you roll this out and being able to control one context document and being able to upload, say, 50 context documents about 50 different product features to one agent was the approach that I wanted to take. But other than that, very similar approach to what Jenny did.
I like the 3 steps. It's just that you follow the same steps as Jenny. It's just that you built one agent for both, and Jenny built 2. Actually, I want to go into that if it's a little detail. In fact, I want to actually do a comparison between the different approaches that you took, what's the benefit and drawbacks to each. But I also want to talk about, comparing it to people not using AI at all for some of these activities, or maybe using AI just to kind of build that first knowledge document without really thinking too much about it. They can go into ChatGPT, put the PRD in, and say, just create a knowledge doc. Because we see that with our clients all the time, right? And then the knowledge doc falls short. Let's talk about the approaches between the 2 of you first, if that's okay.
Sure.
So tell me, Steedan, what was the reason behind your approach? Why did you decide to just create one? And then Jenny, I'm going to go to you and say, why did you decide to create 2 different agents?
Yeah, so from my point of view, the information about the product itself is constant, whether you're internal or external. The point of view is different, but my assumption was that the agent that I was building would be able to handle those differences when explaining to an end user or an internal user.
Right.
So I think my perspective was a little bit different, and then just thinking about from a maintenance point of view, I was thinking, for a product manager, it would be far easier to manage one source of truth for the feature. rather than have to split ones that represent it slightly differently.
Perfect.
Something you said though, which I find is interesting, is we both started first by creating a context document. Something that I experimented with a little bit, it didn't make it into this context doc yet though, was going, and after I had the initial context document, going back into GPT and asking it to anticipate all the types of questions that every single stakeholder would ask. The interesting thing about that is then you can answer all those questions, and then you can take those answers and then put them back into the knowledge document. And so that can become a cyclical thing where you can improve it and upgrade it over time. So I think it's important to note, don't necessarily stick with the first version of the thing you get. You can continue to improve it. It's a starting point, but you can keep adding to it.
I think that's great, because I personally think that that's really the power of AI, is to actually help us think better. And by having AI simulate potential questions, you're now increasing the quality of your knowledge doc or your context doc or whatever your final product is going to be, or final output is going to be, to a much higher level than ever before, right? I like that, Steedan. Jenny, you took a slightly different approach. You decided to create 2 different agents, 2 different context docs to put into the agents.
I actually only created 1 agent, but 2 docs to reference. So,
sorry, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. And the reason why was just separation of concerns of, like I said, that clarity on what customers should know and what the customer support team, needs to handle any situation. So like I did take a little personal experience. Sometimes what I had seen is if that internal versus external isn't explicit, it doesn't know, it might say something to the support rep that then they tell the customer or they think is okay to tell the customer. And so you get into that sticky area of, well, why is this feature built this way? Because I would have thought you guys should do it this way. So like, why is it working this way? Or are you guys going to work on this other feature, in the next future? Is it on the roadmap? Like there's questions that are kind of sticky. And I think giving the support rep that context and confidence that, hey, this is acceptable. You can say this because it's in the external doc, that they, can feel comfortable giving like a true answer to customers.
Like
that was the approach I took. So still 1 agent, but there's
but
the
yes,
2 documents.
1 agent for customers, and then eventually you would build another one for marketing.
Sure.
Correct?
Yeah. Whichever audience that you're, or
whatever
that's
the audience
interacting
is.
with the tool. Right.
Yeah.
Because marketing has their own context.
Yes.
I think.
And the context would change, right?
Right.
And coming back to what Steedan was saying, is that once you have the ability to predict questions and use those questions to then refine your context doc, right? Then that would be very much customized to the different groups of people that you're going after. Can I ask you? So that's great. I wanted to compare the approaches that the 2 of you took. Let's kind of compare it to what this would look like for some of our clients out there who first start with us and they don't even use AI. So tell me at a high level why this is better or worse.
I mean, you cover way more ground and you cover it faster, and you can, I mean, I remember this, I did it manually, like this, years ago. You'd be writing the documentation, you'd be meeting with your stakeholders, and all along you're bringing them along the ride. Obviously, there should never be a surprise, but that right before release, I would say time frame is the most critical. And you have your release notes, you have your email that goes out, your launch email, all of that stuff has to be collaborated with all your stakeholders. And it doesn't cover everything. Having AI anticipate, like I said, pull out the gaps for me. What am I even not seeing? Because like you said, Mustafa, there's a lot going on. Maybe you're rushed, maybe you don't have the time. It's been a long day, right? And you got to sit down and have some time to think. AI can help you find those gaps faster.
100%.
And it also gives it a little bit more sustainability. The second you create a knowledge base article, it goes stale. So if you're giving more breadth of context, of more wider breadth of like what they need to know about, I would say that's that far reaching is what we're looking for. And then the interaction with the agent is what can zero it back in for them, depending on the question that they're asking.
Yeah. And
So,
you know what I like about the agent part too is that it's always a living document, right? So if new things come up, you just update the context. The agent doesn't change,
mhm,
right? They can
the
just answer
instructions
the
don't
questions,
change. Yep.
which you could
Mhm.
never do before if you're just creating, if you're not doing this, if you're just doing the old way in which you're just creating things on, for lack of a better word, paper and pencil. You mentioned that it's both speed and quality were one of the biggest differences. Jenny, how long did this whole thing take you? Because I know you and Steedan were experimenting.
Yeah, our first experiment was like 30 minutes, I think, to get our initial ideas out. And then I
Yeah.
pressure tested a couple versions of it, like for another 30 minutes maybe. Um, so yeah, I
So
think the
maybe an
time was more
hour,
so
and now
making
you
sure
actually
this,
have this. And because you're
yeah,
using the well-structured prompt and you're using agents, you can just make it repeatable. So now the next time around, you just change um,
Yeah.
the context of the launch details, and you can rerun that prompt, right?
yeah, the time isn't using the AI tools. The time I think is just making sure that the output is accurate,
Yeah.
reviewing
Oh,
it
that's right.
and
The
that
reviewing, yeah.
it's, mhm.
Hmm.
Thank you, Jenny. Steven, I'm going to ask you a much more difficult question. Let's just say that, and we've seen this, right? Our clients are using AI, right? But they're not using
Mm-hmm.
it the way you guys did. They don't go through the rigor
Right.
of pressure testing, predicting questions, updating the knowledge base, reviewing it, and so on and so forth. So tell me what the differences are there. And then what are the real benefits between the approach that you shared versus what most PMs who use AI do it?
Yeah. So what we see a lot of the time is PMs might, and this is iffy, but they might take some raw inputs and put that into the
Yeah.
AI, and then get it to help them write an email. They might just get it to help them write an email about the release without any inputs and very little context, which is a good starting point, but
Yeah.
it's definitely not leveraging the benefits of AI to the full extent. That differs a lot from what we did. We took the raw inputs, we put them into AI, we had it generate a context
Yeah.
document, we reviewed and curated and perfected that context document. Then from there, if you wanted to generate an email, you could, and it has all the context now that it needs. But we went a step further. I did take Peter's original email and I went back and I rewrote it. And before I even had AI write the email, I had it go through and anticipate all the stakeholder questions and concerns
Perfect.
and incorporate those into the email
Yeah.
as part of it as
Yeah.
well. And so a lot more valuable in terms of the output that we got from that, and more robust. And we know, like, anytime you release anything new, lots of people have lots of questions, right? Everybody's asking, well,
Yeah.
what does this mean for me? And what does this do? And so if you can anticipate some of those questions, then you can eliminate a lot of that back and forth and save a lot of time.
I really like that analogy because you are, like we said earlier, using AI to think better, right? And so you're creating artifacts and documents that are highly customized to that audience in that scenario, which we were never able to do in the past, right? Which I think is good. At a high level, if you guys could just go back to it, Steven, just benefits, like what are outcomes? I know we talked about speed, we talked about quality. Anything else that came to mind?
Less rework. So I think often, we're not considering all the implications of the things we do. We try our best to, but you can't consider everything. And so sometimes, having some of these ideas of second order effects thrown out there, concerns of other departments, maybe
Yeah.
finance might have a concern. Maybe finance doesn't even know they have that concern until you come to them and say, hey, AI said this might be a concern. Is this a concern? And then,
That's
oh,
true.
yeah, no, it is. And so you can save a lot of frustration, a lot of
Yes.
time with
Yes.
rework. I think that's a key benefit.
Yeah, I think that's good. Let me flip this around because it's not all roses, right? When you guys did this. So tell me of the approach that you guys used, the 3 steps in which you predicted the questions, built the first draft, refined it, and then built it into an agent. What didn't work, or what are some of the drawbacks of using that approach?
I'll start with one thing that I find challenging about this in
Yeah.
general is you generate a lot of content that now you have to go and read. And I find that sometimes going and having to read and curate content is sometimes more tiring than just writing the content. Obviously, it's covering a lot more area than what I would have covered on my own. That's the whole point. But it is a lot. It's taxing to have to go and read everything thoroughly.
That's true.
Um,
or at least skim it
it's
at a high level. Yeah.
it is. I mean, you still have to put that time in. And so the risk
Yeah.
is if you don't put the time in, then what are you saying? What are you putting out there? Is it accurate? You really need to do, you really need to put that time in to make sure.
But this goes back to what we keep saying, right? We have to have a human in the loop, because otherwise
Have
you're
to.
basically outsourcing everything to AI. Then you have no idea what it's going to produce is accurate or not, right?
Exactly.
Jenny, what about you? What was what didn't work, or what was challenging about this approach?
Yeah, I initially attempted, like I said, to not have the two internal versus external, and it just sometimes if you don't break things up first, you
Yeah.
just want to go faster and get to the outcome faster, you lose quality. So I think for me, it's finding that balance between high quality output that I'm reading through and I feel
Yeah.
comfortable with, but then also not investing or over investing too much time and pressure testing it.
Yeah.
That I think is a skill set that you just learn the more you experiment and the more use cases that you're tackling with this type of approach. Because this could be applied, we talked about this, not just for this example here with knowledge based articles
Yeah.
and stakeholder preps, but this motion of using agents in general with contextual information to kind of get more accurate responses is a practice that I think you still have to run through several
100%.
times. So you
100%.
then, we talked about this to Steedan in another time. It's like, when do you reach that diminishing returns point where you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I need to step back, undo all of this and start over. Like, what's my end goal again? Like, so
Yeah.
it gets better and better the more you do it. But I would say like that muscle is tough. You got to find that happy medium between what you're looking for
Yes.
at the output and then how much time you're investing.
No, I agree. And you know how this is, right? With AI, at least when the first time you approach a task, there's a lot of experimentation. And so you go down an avenue and you have to go fairly deep down the avenue to figure out it's not working, which is time consuming, but I agree. I would have, I was thinking about this too, when we were prepping for this. I would have actually even broken it down further. I would have actually just said, first anticipate questions without actually building the context doc. Then go through the questions, identify which are the right questions that you want to answer, because not every question AI is going to give is going to be the right question, right? Then use those questions to build a context doc, and then use that context doc into the agent. And so when you break it up into 3 micro tasks, as opposed to 2, you may actually have even fine grain control, right? And instead, it makes your reading a lot less.
Well, it's a little bit of reading at a time. Yeah, you're not reading everything all at once. Yeah, for sure.
So, good. But what you do highlight is, actually, before we go there, tell me what are some of the other approaches that you used that did not work? I know, Jenny, you just talked about one. Steedan, did you use any approach that did not work or ran into a dead end?
No, actually, no, I didn't. For me, the approach I took for what I was looking for worked out of the box. Although I've done this a few times, and so I kind of had a sense of what would work already. But no, for me, it worked out of the box.
Perfect. Let's go to, I know we talked about impact on a personal level, right? But when every PM in an organization starts using this, the entire level of product craft in that organization increases, right? If you think about it from an org perspective, the approach that you just shared, what's possible now? How does the organization benefit?
I think, like I said at the top, it's creating that level of trust that they have some place to go, they know where to
Yeah.
go, and they know that it's exhaustive in terms of, in this case, the agent that they can interact with. I think equipping them with those tools allows that like more that stronger collaboration right before go live. You know, the support team feels, hey, you guys, as long as you give us that same tool you did last time, like we're going to feel ready. You're still going to be meeting with them, and like I said,
Right.
creating that what's coming first. But yeah, I would say that collaboration with each other is super important, and having
100%.
these tools at their fingertips, they have that confidence that they're going to be able to answer the questions for the
Yeah.
customer, that marketing is going to be able to create content and, you know, have a go to market strategy for this, and that the sales team is going to know what they can or cannot sell. Well, that's really all the questions they want to know, right? And so
Yeah, I
um
agree.
you know, they don't need to say, oh, I gotta go to I've got to bother the PM again, I gotta bother the PM again, right? It's they have a place to go, right?
Yeah,
You actually
that's
touched
good.
on something I was going to add, Jenny, is that bothering the PM, often product knowledge lives within this silo,
Mhm.
and it can be hard to get access to it if you're in another department. And
Yeah.
so giving really easy access to all the information about the product and having it up to date and accurate, and just AI and taking this approach just makes it easier to maintain and create,
Yeah.
and makes it more accessible to everybody else. Definitely is good from a PM perspective. It's going to save you a lot of time. A lot fewer people coming to you asking
Yeah.
basic
You
questions
have less
about what the
people
product
bothering
does.
you.
Well, and
Right.
you have more time to focus on the things that really matter,
Yeah.
the bigger issues, and less answering simple questions about what the product does.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think both from an organization and individual perspective, if a lot of PMs are answering customer service questions, they're not focusing on building the product, right? And from an
Mhm.
organization level, it just looks like we're not treating our partners fairly, because we have a lot of knowledge and it's locked up within this organization. And so it's our job to prepare them as they move forward. This has been great. I really like the approach you guys took, right? I mean, I kind of threw this example to you. Believe it or not, this came from, like I said, from a real client. And I love the fact that you guys took it. You took different approaches. I like the fact that you ran some problems, which is always good, because that always happens. There's a reason why this episode is called AI in real life. um, but I would love to have you guys back, and maybe we can actually do another scenario too. Yes.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And for our audience out there, tell us what you think. Tell us how your teams are using AI, how they would have actually approached this problem, and where you fall in that spectrum of not using AI at all. Are you kind of using AI lightly, or are you using AI just like what Steedan and Jenny are showing? Because that makes a huge difference in how, on the level of maturity, the organization has when it's using AI. Awesome. Thank you guys, and thanks for watching.
Thanks.
Thanks.